Superhero stories are enjoying quite a moment in our culture. They are packing movie theaters, they are popping up on various television networks, and they are as well as on multiple streaming channels. In the past, we've always had a superhero movie now and then, including multiple iterations of Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, but it's never been quite like this. Not only in volume, but also in expanding the universe of heroes to include prominent female heroes like Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel, as well as people of color like Black Panther and Luke Cage. And I'm not afraid to admit it, as you can probably already tell, but I am a fan. I enjoy the stories, especially the origin stories. And while I'm not a fan of the violence per se, I appreciate that for the most part, the focus of these stories is on protecting the vulnerable among us. But what I like most about the current approach to the superhero movie is that despite their superpowers, all of these supposedly extraordinary people are at their core incredibly human, facing some of the same challenges we all face in our lives. They are subject to the human capacity for jealousy and for greed. They make mistakes, and given their super status, their mistakes are fairly super as well. And they strive for redemption in the face of those mistakes. They are also, just like the rest of us, simply trying to find their place in the world. They are looking to settle into a sense of home. This past week, I began watching the latest season of Marvel's Iron Fist on Netflix. I wasn't a big fan of the first season. I thought it kind of came up short, but I figured I'd give the second season a try. I'd heard good things. Toward the end of the first episode, there is a scene between the two lead characters, Danny Rand and Colleen Wing, who are romantically linked and live together. Danny describes to Colleen how, after a life filled with more than his share of turmoil, their home is the first place he's ever felt safe, like a real home. And he expresses his hope that she too will come to feel that way. And believe it or not, that exchange got me thinking about this sermon. As we've already covered in this particular sermon series about coming home, the idea of home, while often linked to a particular place, is not necessarily defined by that geographic location. And despite the fact that we might speak of a home often referring to a house, the experience of coming home or being home is really more of a feeling. For Danny Rand, someone with extraordinary powers and a hero's mentality, he experienced the feeling and security of home with this person who cared for him and accepted him, something for which we are all searching, and hopefully a feeling we have found in our lives. For we may occupy many physical locations at the various times in our life, but to truly feel at home may be a fleeting feeling. At the time Paul writes this second letter to the early church in Corinth, he is writing to a community that is apparently in turmoil. It is a place he has visited, probably twice, by what we know, and with whom he feels a connection. However, there are competing voices in the community, and they lack a sense of cohesion, thus Paul's letter. In the midst of his writing throughout the entire letter, there are hints about the influence of other false prophets who have come to their community and troubling circumstances that have caused unrest among the believers. In what is his usual style, Paul confronts these matters with a combination of direct challenge and more subtle reassurance. The direct challenges come early in his writing, as he names these other apostles' message as a corrupting force among the people. And perhaps that would be a fun topic to explore, but that is for another day, for while I am certain some or even many among us might associate such confrontational styles with their home lives, I myself have a very confrontational older brother. I do not believe it helps us this morning. Instead, I want to focus on the reassuring message we find in the passage we shared this morning, as it has at its core a reassuring message that has resounded through the ages with people facing difficult circumstances. It is often interpreted as a promise to the downtrodden and marginalized of something better in the next life, when we have left behind the limitations and disappointments of this life. How is it that Paul puts it? For we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. And that is, to be sure, a faithful interpretation. But as you likely know, I am one who prefers to focus on this life. And we collectively do not find ourselves living lives that seem particularly hopeless, I don't imagine. In fact, I might imagine, relative to most people in the world, we are actually living lives of relative abundance and privilege. So would such a message offer any meaning for us? Since I'm preaching here on this passage, you might correctly guess that I would say yes, it has meaning for us. And here's why. Paul's message, contrasting an earthly building with a spiritual home, helps us in our exploration of this idea of coming home. It points us away from that which is purely physical to a broader, deeper understanding of home for what it truly is, a feeling and an experience. Last week we talked about home being defined in large part by the people who share a space with us. And I said then, I do believe that these people and the communities they create with us do contribute to that feeling of home. The same can be said for the places themselves, as we develop a level of familiarity and adopt a sense of ownership of a place. But all of this points to something that lies at the core of this concept of home, and that is the feeling that we have about a place or community that makes it our home. And that feeling of home may reflect a sense of settledness in a life of constant motion and frequent moves. It may reflect a sense of familiarity with both the people and the place, a deep sense of knowing. It may reflect a sense of safety in a world and a culture that can be threatening. It may reflect a sense of freedom to be oneself, again in a world that seeks to define who we should be and surrounded by judgment and condemnation should one stray from the agreed upon norms. And what Paul is offering is, in this attempt to reassure the people of Corinth, is a promise that this feeling of home is something that God wishes for all people, regardless of their circumstances. It's a feeling that comes from God and from the people that God has placed in our lives. For God offers us unconditional love and acceptance, and that is what lies at the core of the feeling of home. And my friends, it is a feeling that we as a community of God's people are called to not only seek for ourselves, but to create and offer to all with whom we come in contact. Again, I find myself thinking about the statement we make at the start of each worship service, and you know it, so feel free to say it with me. No matter who you are and where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. This ideal of welcome embodied in these words and that we articulate in the broader welcome statement that is printed on your bulletins, and the value of acceptance and love that underlie it, are a promise to those who come into our midst and to those whom we encounter. For whether we live extraordinary lives or lives of simplicity, each of us yearns to experience that special feeling. And our commitment, embodied in these words, is that we are a place and a people that can offer a sense of settledness, a sense of familiarity, a sense of safety, and a sense of freedom to be oneself. We are a place and a people that can offer the feeling of home. For my friends, when we explore the true meaning of home, we realize that home is a feeling that results from, hints at, and reveals to us the presence of God. And that is what we as individuals are encouraged to seek, and we as a community are called to embody. May God bless each of us to know that feeling of home in our lives. And may God bless us to provide the feeling of home to all whose lives we touch through our ministries. Amen.